Congratulations on making it to the 11th installment of Good Design, Bad Design. Or you skip straight to this one. Either way works. You can start here and catch up on the other episodes later. Like always, we're going to go over more case studies of video games that showcase good and bad principles of graphic design. Graphic design covers things like menus, UI, UX, color choice, font choice, animation, character design, the presentation of information. Also, remember that good games can have bad graphic design, and vice versa. I'm taking some of my favorite games to task, so don't sweat it if your favorites are in a bad design. If you have any suggestions for games you'd like to see in a good design or a bad design, let us know in the comments. Just to shake things up a little, this episode will pair up concepts, one good and one bad segment for each. First up is the pairing of money and the sponsorship. What if I gave you 5 minutes to stop elite super hackers from seeing your downloads, bank info, files, and other internet activities? But you need to do it while you watch region block streaming content. Impossible. What kind of super service could do those things? Oh my god, it's today's sponsor, ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is the layer of protection that keeps prying eyes away from your data and ensures that 100% of your internet traffic is encrypted, which keeps you safe at even the sketchiest of public Wi-Fi hotspots. But my favorite part is how easy it makes it to get around region locking on streaming services like Netflix. With just a couple clicks, ExpressVPN lets me change my online location and explore different Netflix libraries around the world, which gives me access to thousands of new movies and TV shows. I can connect to UK servers and watch Faulty Towers and Top Gear on Netflix with super fast streaming speeds. That's worth it right there. ExpressVPN is the top-rated VPN provider from CNET, The Verge, Wired, and many more. Find out how you can get 3 months free by clicking the link in the description below. expressvpn.com/designdoc. Thanks, ExpressVPN. Good design. Not everything in a game is meant to be interactable. Since games are a constructed, unfamiliar space, game designers need to signal in some way which parts of the game world are interactable and which ones aren't. Without that signal, what is and is not an important object will be confusing to the game's players. Way too many old point-and-click adventure games made key items look just like the background scenery, which frustrated players. So many games did it that they invented a term for it, the pixel hunt. No one wants a pixel hunt. So if you're making art assets for a game, you'll need to do something to differentiate interactable and decorative items. But what can you do? And how do you make a signal that doesn't look so out of place that it breaks immersion? You've got to be subtle. One technique you'll be familiar with is parallax. This is used all the time in platformers. For background elements in 2D games, parallax is super useful to signal which parts of the scene are in the distance. Parallax refers to how background elements will move at varying speeds, which emulates how objects far off in the distance will hide behind closer elements. Implicitly, the distant items won't be interactable to your character, so that alone helps signal that those objects are decorative. Another great way to indicate distance is through desaturating colors. Desaturated backgrounds make it look like you're seeing them through an atmospheric haze, which again suggests a lot of space between you and them thar hills. NES Mario 3 hills? No haze, mostly no parallax. It just looks like scenery for a stage play. Huh. Games like Guacamelee though, parallax and desaturation. Look at that. That's way back there. For foreground elements, signaling that an item is interactable is a little more freeform. Let's look at HAL Labs' Time UFO. You fly this little UFO around and use your little crane to pick up little objects to complete little jobs for a little money. So figuring out what parts of the world can be picked up with your crane is incredibly important for the game's art direction to make clear. Time UFO does it by playing with the color saturation and the outlines of the objects. The game's backgrounds have a ton of charming animated characters and fun scenery to give a lot of personality to the locations. But those elements are not supposed to be interactable. They use parallax scrolling and desaturation to suggest distance, and that distance also implies that you're not going to be picking up this crazy circus dolphin with your crane. Objects in the foreground, however, are differentiated by their outlines. Items you can pick up have heavy black outlines. It's an easy signal that highlights without distracting. Non-interactable objects have thinner outlines. After you get used to the signal, the game will play around with the expectations it sets. The sumo wrestler has a thick outline, except around the arms. He can't be picked up by his arms. The game's visual design language consistency signals a lot of subtle rules of the game world without stopping and telling you directly with a tutorial or something. The game will also hide secret interactable objects in the background, and hint at them with hidden goal images. The items intentionally blend into the background a little, but the outlines are your clue that they're still interactable. It creates a nice aha moment when you spot it, all thanks to the game's consistent visual language. Time UFO's use of outlines, parallax, and desaturation help clarify the gameplay, while giving the art directors plenty of leeway to let the game's quirky charm shine through.
Bad design.
When contrast goes wrong, it can go really wrong. Bad contrast issues can cause a chain reaction that might make the game itself practically unplayable. Like Sonic Lost World. Sonic Lost World has bonus stages that play like a circus-themed breakout, but it's on the Wii U, so you'll have to use the Wii U gamepad touchscreen to move the platform with your finger. You launch Sonic and Tails into the air, so they hit some balloons that break open and free the animals within. Sounds like a perfectly decent bonus stage so far. Now, destroy all the contrast. It's really easy to lose track of your player characters. The game's camera on the TV half is zoomed out to see the entire stage at once, making your characters super tiny. The camera is slightly zoomed in on the gamepad, but the characters are still very small, and the camera is tied to the platform you control, so you can't see the whole field there either. Neither screen is ideal to use. When you launch, your characters go into their ball form. There's a little glow around your characters that does do a little bit to help you keep track of where you are when you're starting. Then you hit a balloon. Where's Sonic? Your character immediately exits their ball form, changing the silhouette you were tracking from a ball to a tiny amorphous noodle-armed sprite with a lighter color palette. But no time to care about that because there's literally animals and fireworks bursting out from exactly where your character's sprite is. The animals are a little bigger than your character and even obscure the screen. The most important thing the player is supposed to track is being covered up by glorified confetti on top of a neon, warm-colored, circusy background. And now you lost. Of course you lost. You never had a chance. But even good games can get the color contrast wrong. Controversial opinion incoming. Get ready for it. Tetris Effect has contrast problems. I love the game, and it's an incredible audio-visual experience through and through. But it's definitely not my first choice if I just want to play some Tetris for Tetris' sake. Usually, Tetris games are very good with color contrast. Take Tetris 99. Bright, clear, colorful pieces on a plain dark background. Each piece is color-coded, so you know what's coming next just from catching a glimpse in your periphery. Great contrast, easy to read. Tetris Effect is sometimes that good, but also sometimes the exact opposite of that. Some of the stages and themes forego clarity to develop a certain vibe. Pieces are usually not color-coded. The particle effects for clearing lines can be intense, which is again great for setting a vibe, but not great for clarity. For less experienced Tetris players on more difficult stages, the theming can get in the way of planning ahead and seeing precisely what you need to do to persevere. Now, even though the contrast is clearly an issue in places, I can't fault Tetris Effect too much. These problems are sacrifices made in service to a greater purpose. Tetris Effect is supposed to be a trance-inducing journey through artistic landscapes, with Tetris there to help you zone out and get into the groove. If I want to play Tetris with clear eyes and a full heart, I'll boot up Tetris 99. But if I want a Tetris experience, then the contrast problems are a small price to pay for the bigger effect. Depending on your design goals, if you want to go for something spectacular and stylish, you will often risk sacrificing readability to some extent. Sometimes you can work a little harder and strike a solid balance, but sometimes you'll have to make a trade-off. Just make it worth it in the end.
Good design.
Whenever you hear someone talk about how polished the game is, it can sound pretty vague. What is polish anyway? It's a lot of little things, but a big factor contributing to how polished the game feels is its animation. Traditionally, there are 12 principles of animation, and back in Volume 8, we analyzed how Cuphead uses one of them, anticipation, to make the gameplay feel excellent while staying true to its cartoon aesthetic. But anticipation isn't the only principle you need to adapt to make good game animations. Let's start at the top. The 12 principles of animation are a list of techniques that help an animator make more realistic, livelier, and more exciting animations. They are squash and stretch, which helps give an animated object a sense of material and weight. Anticipation, which helps the viewer prepare and predict the action to come. Staging, the presentation or framing of an animation. It helps make clear what's important in a scene. Pose to pose and straight ahead action, which are ways for an animator to think about what to draw to make an object move from one position to another. Follow through and overlapping action, which gives an animated object a sense of realistic physics, and therefore more natural motion. Slow in, slow out, which also anchors an object in realistic physics, and helps keep the movements from feeling too jerky. Arcs, which emulates how real motion tends to follow arcs. Not kidding. Animating in straight lines can look weird. Secondary action, where moving multiple parts of an object at once helps make the animation more interesting to look at. Timing, which dictates how fast it appears an animated object is moving. Exaggeration, which can be more interesting than 100% realistic movement, and helps leverage animation's greatest asset, its ability to create its own reality. Solid drawing, which helps make a 2D drawing look like it's a 3D object. And appeal, which is pretty much just making your character cool. There are a ton of great videos that go into much more detail about the basics of the 12 principles, especially how they apply to traditional animation. But for now, let's see how the principles are put to use in a game. How about Hyperlight Drifter? Hyperlight Drifter's animation is great, but it's easy to overlook why it looks great. It's not because the pixel art is beautiful, even though it is. The secret sauce is how Hyperlight Drifter nails the fundamentals. And just because they're fundamentals doesn't mean they're easy to do. Let's look at the two major actions you'll be seeing throughout the game: the dash and the basic sword attack. The dash is only 4 frames long, shifting between 3 different sprite poses and 8 frames of recovery at 30 FPS. In that tiny number of frames, they cram in a ton of principles. From idle, the character goes into their dashing pose immediately. Like in Cuphead, the anticipation for a player character is absent, which makes the character feel much snappier, and isn't as necessary because it's the player themselves choosing to start the motion. The player knows what's coming next without the anticipation. There's exaggeration on the back leg to emphasize the speed of the dash. The overlapping action on the cape implies how the air is being pushed into it. 2 frames are used on the same pose, and the cape follows an arc downwards as it falls. The next frame is the end of the dash, with the character bringing both legs back in as he prepares to stop, going from stretch to squash. This frame transitions into the longer recovery phase of the move. For the first recovery frame, the drifter shifts his pose as he's coming to a sudden stop, and shifts his weight back with legs planted firmly in the ground. The difference between this frame and the last sells us on the speed of the action. He stays in this pose, and some more overlapping action happens with his cape as it flutters forward for a few frames, implying the cape's weight and volume through solid drawing. The last few frames show the drifter returning to his idle pose, ready to be controlled again. It's a super basic animation, but it's very fundamentally sound. It's enhanced by special effects that help emphasize and sell the dash's speed and supernatural power, and helps make it more readable in the middle of a fight. The red line follows the drifter and an after image draws your eye in the direction of the dash. The masked animation of a diamond symbol also plays with a visual motif present throughout the game, and gives a handy little reference point for the dash's distance. Hyperlight Drifter's slash is an even shorter animation, 10 frames total. There is a little anticipation on the first frame, which helps add to the feeling of momentum and power the slash has. The second frame has a clear full arc with a beautiful cyan smear frame. The third frame transitions to the recovery phase, with the sword behind the character's back, with more overlapping action on the cape for the next 4 frames, similar to the dash. The small number of frames is an application of timing, and it actually helps make the slash feel punchy and quick, exactly what you want for a commonly used move like the basic slash. The extra frames of recovery at the end both act to embellish the motion with overlapping action on the cape, but also create a little space to let players follow up with additional slashes without having to return to the idle pose for each, which would look very stilted and awkward. With so few actual animation frames though, it helps to exaggerate and embellish to really sell the action. The smear frame with the sword arc is a good start, but you can do more. When you actually land a hit on an enemy, Hyperlight Drifter sells the impact with a screen shake and blood splatter animation to confirm the hit and freezes the drifter on the first recovery frame for about 5 frames before resuming the animation like normal. Quick and easy, no extra work required for the animators, but it's still very effective. Each of these animations happens in the blink of an eye, but by cramming them with solid, fundamentally sound animation techniques and impactful special effects and embellishments, Hyperlight Drifter's animations are economical and outstanding. But what does it look like when you don't stick to the principles? It's probably fine, right? Right?
Bad design.
You ever see that image of what cookies look like if you skip one of the ingredients? Let's do that for animation. While not necessary for every animation, Squash and Stretch is great for emphasizing speed, weight, elasticity, and impact even when used sparingly in more realistic animation. Without it, an animation might not be as punchy, satisfying, or expressive, maybe even a bit dull. No anticipation is okay for player characters in action games, but not for computer-controlled characters. If you want to make a cheap boss in an old fighting game though, there's no easier way to do it than to take normal moves and remove the anticipation. No staging can mislead and confuse players. If you don't emphasize the important bits, they will get lost in the shuffle. Or if your camera glitches out and points somewhere it shouldn't, that's bad staging. If you pick the wrong technique in post-to-pose and straight-ahead action, you can make inconsistent and unnatural movements. Straight-ahead action works well for effects, and pose-to-pose makes it easier to animate characters in action. No pose-to-pose can tend to make characters kinda do their own thing. Like animation improv. Maybe you can pull it off better than this, but no guarantees. No follow-through and overlapping action makes animated objects look less real. Hair and cloth are especially prone to seeming off without it. It also can highlight keyframes rather than making them blend in with the rest of the action. No slow in, slow out is the quickest way to remove the feeling of real-world physics from an animation. Acceleration and deceleration look way more natural than an immediate start or stop. Without decent arcs, your characters might look unnaturally stiff. Starting with a motion capture performance or using references can get rid of a lot of this problem. But without it, you'll have to do a lot of subtle manual work to not make your characters look like frozen robots. Leaving out secondary action gives a certain bad Flash movie vibe to the whole thing. Don't do that. Unless you've got like an action figure aesthetic going on. I guess that could work. If you don't use timing, well, literally it's not animation anymore. Bad timing though makes actions feel like they have way less or way more weight and impact than they should. No exaggeration is actually totally fine, but stylistically it's a little dry. Rotoscoping is pretty much no exaggeration animation. No solid drawing makes your characters look like a shape-shifting blob. Ah, Zelda again. And no appeal is how you get this guy. Not every game is going to get all these fundamentals right. Plenty of great games have some janky animation in there, but if you study the fundamentals of animation, you'll have a better sense of what rules you can break and when. I put a link in the description for a video with more detail on the 12 principles if you're interested. Apply them well, and you can elevate your game to a new level of polish.